Okay, hi, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you. Okay, so I guess we'll get started now. I'm going to start with a quick recap of what we've done, what we did last week, and what we're uh, aiming towards. Okay, so far we've seen how Rav Soloveitchik treats the biblical figures from Abraham and on, not only typologically, not only as archetypes, paradigms, but as authentic people, as opposed to the typology that he uses with Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava. Okay, we went on to see how um, he believed that the historical community that we belong to is a reincarnation of its father. So therefore, our uh, ancestors live on within us. And then last time we saw that this is due to the Rav's idea of linear time, meaning that, I'm sorry, non-linear time, qualitative versus quantitative time, that if we view time in this way, that time actually is a metaphysical entity and not just a way of counting, chronological. That means that I am part of a chain that stretches back towards the past and at the same time forward to the future. And by continuing the tradition of my forefathers, my ancestors live on within me. And I can change the future by handing out that Masorah to my descendants. So I also am connected to the future. We also saw how he saw time as reversible, and he used the proof of tshuva for this. If I can go back and rewrite my past and undo the sins that I've done, then that means that I can, in effect, actually go back in time and change things. And this is only if we view time in this unique way. We also saw he views time as cyclical. And as we go through the yearly calendar, even the weekly calendar, the monthly calendar, we are actually revisiting, even more than revisiting, we are re-experiencing those moments in history that transformed us as a nation. It's not just a ceremony, it's not just a commemoration. And and then finally, we took a look at how he views the Masorah, the chain of tradition. And we saw that he believed that if we are part of this chain, then therefore we have access uh, to the people who in the past passed along the chain and in the future. So I can actually, so to speak, learn together with the Avos, with the Tanam, with the Amoram, with the Rishonim, Achronim. They are literally there in the room with me. And finally, we took a look at who first uncovered the secret of this Masorah community that actually I can, so to speak, learn with my forefathers. And that was Yaakov Avinu, because he was the first person in the Torah to learn with his grandchildren. And that is what we were in the middle of when we ended last time. So I'm going to share the screen and we'll just take a look at the last paragraph or two. Um, okay, everyone hears me okay? Okay, and everyone is sees the screen?
Yes.
Okay, all
Yes.
right, thank you. All right, so I'll just pick up from over here. This is an excerpt from an essay, The First Jewish Grandfather. So, Abraham and Isaac transmitted their spiritual heritage to their sons, not to their grandsons. The latter received it from their fathers, but there was no direct communication between Abraham and Jacob or between Isaac and Reuben and Shimon. The influence was indirect, but Yaakov, however, related directly to his grandchildren. He didn't need an intermediary or an interpreter. His was a direct dialogue. He leaped over the gulf of generations and transmitted the great Masorah of Abraham directly to Ephraim and Manasseh. Despite the discrepancy of years, the Zaken, the carrier of the old tradition, succeeded. The Rav also pointed out he's the only one who's called Zaken, and he is connecting it with this. He says this is why, because he embodied our forefather that we can always clasp hands with, so to speak. And how appropriate, therefore, that our people are called Israel, Yisrael, or Yaakov, because he's the one who created the Jewish community, which ensures our continuity. He laid our foundation. And so even though the bris, the covenant, was initially made with Abraham, it was not until Yaakov that the secret of perpetuating the Masorah was discovered. Um, and then he quotes the Medrash, which somebody actually shared last time, that the sons of Yosef actually studied with their grandfather, and it was the source is in Rashi, and also he quotes it from the Tanhuma. It was the Zaken who listened to their problems, conversed, and worked closely with them, played and planned with them. The most effective teacher is not he who lectures his students with detachment, but rather he who befriends his disciples, and together they become co-searcher and co-dreamers in the pursuit of truth. So he knew that secret. He was able to unite the generations. Some can do it. Sadly, some cannot bridge the generation gap. But a parent or a grandparent or a teacher can guarantee the survival of the Masorah in this way. Okay, so I am now, what I'd like to do is go on to our next topic, which I'm calling the magic hand of Drush. So what we're going to do is look at different examples of how the Rav interpreted the Chumash and see how he incorporated these ideas. But I first want to actually just jump into one of his pieces of drush, which is very powerful. And I'm going to try to play a little bit of a recording, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along. So, okay, so before I go on, anyone have any questions till this point? No, we're good. Okay, fine. So, this essay, which is actually printed in Vision and Leadership, a book which I've showed you in the past by the Tor Sarah Foundation. It's about the stories of Yosef and Moshe. So we're going to look at one essay that the Rav, actually, it was a speech that he gave originally. I believe it was in the Lincoln Square Synagogue, called Concepts in Jewish Education. And he brings actually a personal anecdote of what happened to him when he was a child in Cheder, back in Kaslavich. And then he makes the connection to a lot of these ideas of the Masorah that we just looked at. And we'll see how he connects it, or how his Malamed, his Rebbe, connected it back. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. Okay. So I'm going to start. I'm going to read part of it because it's really too long to play the whole thing, but you can all go back to YU Torah if you're interested, and listens to concepts in Jewish education. Um, and I just want to mention, it may not be on there today, but within the next few days, I did sent a Torah in Motion to post a list of, actually, it's a list of links to recordings on, mostly from YU Torah Online, that are clear and powerful. They're not all perfect, but they're all audible if you turn on the volume high. And so this one is actually on that list. So you could easily go back when that posts and look it up. Okay. So, by sheer association, I recall an experience of my early youth. I was about 7 or 8 years old. I attended Cheder in Kaslavich, a small town on the border of White Russia and Russia proper. Okay, so he goes on to say, I'm not going to read the whole thing aloud at this point, that his Rebbe was a Lubavitcher Chassid, not a great scholar, but he was extremely grateful to him because he may not have taught Gemara on such a high level. The story goes that he taught them Tanya, but he had someone posted at the door. I think it may have been the Rav himself, because he used to call him his assistant. And when they saw Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, he was the Rav of the town, so he would need to check the Cheder periodically to see if all was well. And so when they got the signal that the rabbi of the town was approaching, they would hide the Tanyas and take out their Gemaras. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. So the Rav is very grateful to his Rebbe because he didn't train his mind, but he addressed himself to my soul and to my heart. And we can see, if you get to know the Rav's works, we see how he had a little bit of a mystical view of certain things, and he's thanked the Rebbe more than once. He taught me how to dream Judaism, how to experience it, not just practice it. Okay, so then he describes how it was a very murky winter day, maybe kind of like here in New York, where it's pouring and dark, and they were trudging through the mud, the boys, and they got to the cheder, and they were very listless. They were kind of just chanting mechanically. And they were doing the first few psukim of Parshas Vayigash in a dull monotone, and they're reading the story when Yehuda confronts Yosef in Mitzrayim, and he quotes Yosef as saying, Adoni, my Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? Hayesh lecha av o ach? And we told you we have an old father, an Av Zakein, and a young child, a Yeled Zekunim. And then something strange happened. The Melamed, the teacher, who was half asleep, suddenly jumped to his feet with a strange, enigmatic gleam in his eyes. He leaped to his feet like a lion. He usually had velvety blue eyes, but suddenly his eyes became piercing, searching and investigating. He motioned to the reader to stop, and he turned to me. Podrabin, that's what he called him, assistant rabbi. What kind of question did Yosef ask his brothers? Do you have a father? Of course they have a father. Everybody has a father. The only person who had no father was Adam. What kind of question was this? I tried to answer. Yosef, I finally said, meant to find out whether the father was still alive. In such a case, the Melamed thundered back at me. He would have phrased the question quite differently. Is your father still alive? To argue with the Melamed was useless. And then as he began to speak, he was no longer addressing himself to the boys. The impression he gave was that he was speaking to some mysterious visitor, a guest who had come to the cheder and to that cold room. Okay, so I'm going to try to leave the share on, but at the same time, play the audio for the next few minutes. You could hear in the Rav's voice how he explains the rabbi's answer. So just to make sure the question is clear, what the Melamed wanted to know was, why did Yosef phrase himself in that unusual way? Do you have a father? Why didn't he say, is your father still alive? And this is going to be like a classic piece of drush from the Rav. Okay, turn on.
Joseph did not intend to ask his brother about what he calls it, that time it is, then later I discovered it is a Chabad time.
Okay, I'm just pausing for a minute. Do you still, what do you see on your screens? Do you see the text, or do you just see the YU Torah page?
Just the YU Torah page.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to try to hop over here. So it's a little tricky.
And it's very difficult to understand him. Yeah.
Yes, I know. That's why I want to show you the actual.
But about Avot's discussion about the mysterious heart
This is not the right
of
one.
gratitude, the hidden serenity, invisible fatherhood. In another region, you and me,
All right.
in another region, I would say he meant to express the thought that Joseph inquired about existential parenthood, not biological
Okay,
parenthood.
here we are. Okay, so now you can see it, right? So see if you can understand by following.
Father is anxious to learn whether they feel themselves committed to the makor, to the origin. Whether they are origin conscious. Many people are not origin conscious. He wanted to find out whether they are origin conscious. Are you, Joseph, as the brother, rooted in your father you look upon the branches or the blossoms, look upon the roots of the tree. You look upon your father as the feeder, as the foundation of your existence. Do you look upon him as if he were as a provider and sustainer of your existence? Shepherds. We forget their mockery, their origin, and travel and wander from place to place, from pasture to pasture. How you is suddenly stopped addressing himself to the strange invisible visitor and began to talk to us, raising his voice. Are you modest and humble? Do you admit that the old father represents an old tradition? Do you believe that the Father is capable of telling you something new, something exciting, something challenging, something you didn't know before? Or are you insolent, arrogant, and vain, and you deny your dependence upon your Father, upon your Makor? היש לכם אור, exclaimed the Melamed, pointing at my study mate. I had a study mate. That time in the town they said that he is the new prodigy. He was stupid on the But then we had the reputation of a prodigy. I had the reputation of a smart child, he had the reputation of a prodigy. So he told it was called Itzig Schmidt, and his father was a blacksmith. You say Itzig. You were the prodigy. It was very hard to find out whether maybe he was serious about it or was sarcastic. When you say Itzig the prodigy, who knows more? Itzig? Because he knows 150 block Gemara by heart? That's very legendary. He didn't know a single page by heart. 150 pages of Gemara by heart? Or his father, Rabbi Yaakov Shmid, Jacob the blacksmith, who can hardly read Hebrew, can hardly daven. Are you proud? Are you in the whisper, the Jew admits the supremacy of his father right here. Another factor, he recognizes also the supremacy of the universal Father, who is very, very, very old. Hatik Yomi. Almighty is called Hatik Yomi. Old in Jesus. Neil Madeo.
Okay, so I hope that you were able to follow along a little bit and get a taste of hearing the Rav. He just goes on to ask a further question. When Yosef asked Hayesh Hashem Ach, he was not really asking literally, do you have a brother? But does your time awareness include the future? Do you believe the future can be shaped by our present actions? Do you know that it is worthwhile to sacrifice for the future? That is represented by this little brother. Or do you know nothing of the future, nothing of the little boy, and nothing of the old man? So before we go, I go on to the next piece. Does anyone want to share with us what would you in this piece of drush, the way the Rav interpreted Yosef's question, and what we saw till now in the Rav's ideas of the Masorah? What was he really asking? What was Yosef really asking his brothers when he said, "Do you have a father?"
Are you part of the Masorah?
Exactly. Like, do you look on your father as the root and you are the branch? Um, and he asked the same question of the future. Do you have a brother? The brother symbolizes okay, technically Binyamin was their brother, but he, in this piece of Drush, symbolizes the future. Like, do you feel that connection to the future? And just, I don't know how many of you caught that, but it was um, a little funny that the little boy that the Malamed called on, Yitzhak, was supposed to be the town prodigy, knew 150, supposedly knew 150 pages of Gemara by heart, and the Rav somehow was known as the slow one. So if you think about that, that's kind of ironic. Anyway, okay,
Going back to the Torah, when
yes,
Yosef is asking about the father, he did not want really a lot of information. He just wanted to know if the father is still alive. But if he would say, is your father still alive? Right away, they will feel some association. And then all his scam, or whatever it is, whatever he planned, would fall apart. Okay, what the story with the rabbi, with the rebbe, with the story with everything else makes sense. But I think the pshat is amazing because all his plot would not work. And
right,
the
excellent. So what
brothers,
you're doing, yes.
or the brothers would have realized right away. One of them would realize that he knows too much of us, and the plot will not work.
Right. So you're saying that there's the literal level, the pshat level, and then what the Rav is doing here is bringing a drush on the words. So
Yeah,
which may have been possibly in Yosef's mind at the same time, but that was not outright what he was really asking. Um,
Along the same lines,
yeah,
when you ask, is your father still alive? You're also asking, who is the leader here? Who is the head of the family here? Is it your father or is it one of the brothers? I want to know who the leader is of the group.
right. Okay, a very insightful point. So what I want to do now is um, analyze through an article by, we're going to look at an article by Pinchas Pelly, who, Rabbi Pinchas Pelly actually is the author of Al HaTshuva, which is a collection of the Rav's Tshuva drushes. What he also did was, besides everything else that was not connected with the Rav, he wrote a few articles analyzing the Rav's thought, and he wrote, in my opinion, a brilliant article on the Rav's drush. So I want to look into that, and then this will give us guidance to the. I'm going to separate how the Rav brings the Avos to life in two. He does two different things when he does that, and he really, Pelly really puts it into words very beautifully. So let me share the screen again. Okay, so everyone see the screen again now? Okay, so I'm going to go. I just put it at the end. Okay, so the title of the article is The Biblical Hermeneutics of Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, Medium or Message. And it's one of the articles that's posted on the program page, so you could go ahead and read the whole thing if you are interested. So I want to start off with he has a little bit of an introduction. And he just makes a statement here describing the Rav's thought in general, which I think is a very, very apt way of describing it. So we'll start with that.
can
This
you
body of
enlarge
thought,
it by any chance? It's so
I'm
small.
sorry.
Can you
Oops.
enlarge the printing?
Oh yeah, I could, but I think I just
Thank you.
yeah, okay. 1 second. All right. I gotta go back to the share. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try to do that. Let me just get to the page. If it doesn't work this way, I could reopen it in a different way that I'll for sure be able to enlarge it. Oh, okay. How's that? Is it bigger? Okay, so this body
Thank
of
you.
thought, no problem, my pleasure, in our opinion, constitutes a complete and systematic theological philosophical framework, which means a combination of theology and philosophy, religion and thought, even if not offered to us as such. Thus, it is neither the midrashic achievement nor the immediate effect which are paramount, but the construction of a system of thought. And this is the sentence that I want to bring out here. So he says the Rav created the system of thought, independent and original, dealing with God, world, community, and individual. This system is consistent and comprehensible in terms of objective tools of comprehension, combined with implications for personal, subjective existence. Okay, and now he goes back to his question. And so the question returns to its starting point. How is hermeneutics, which is the English word for drush, analysis of the text, to this original and autonomous thought? Okay, just give me a second. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so he first just makes the point here. He quotes a professor, Yocheved, who wrote an article about drush, about how the literature of drush was so essential to the Jewish people during the Middle Ages and in the modern period. Only halachic literature is greater. There is not one Jewish community in which the drush literature is not a central element of its overall literary product. And over here, Peli talks about how drush is as its sources are ancient, going back to the Midrash on the Talmud, on Gemara, and it is as old as Jewish creativity itself. And he calls it the spinal cord of classical Jewish thought from its beginning, appearing even in the Torah in a way up until our day. Okay, so the question is, we have to understand before we get to how he interprets Rav Soloveitchik, what is the point of Medrash? Why were Chazal interpreting the psukim in the Torah in different ways? What were they trying to achieve? And then their imitators, so to speak, those who walked in their footsteps all through the ages when different biblical commentators um, added to the text, enlarged the text, drew messages from the text. So what he is saying in this paragraph is that the common element of drush in all its manifestations, it is a defender in the breach in these confrontations. What does he mean? What he said a little earlier in this page is that we, the Jewish people, through the ages, had many confrontations, many conflicts, many mountains we had to climb, whether it was within the Jewish community itself or adapting to the outside world as we moved from culture to culture, from whether it was we were on our own land in Eretz Yisrael or whether we were in Galut. And what the rabbis were doing when they created the Midrash, it was to address these various issues and to help us understand them, help us deal with them, whether it was to reject or to perhaps partially accept them or live with them. So the words of the Torah are timeless, and they can be interpreted and reinterpreted through the ages to fit every situation, if we believe in the eternity of the Torah. So either it rejects the opposing viewpoints that are coming in from the outside totally, or it mediates, sort of there's a compromise. And again, this is by means of the homiletic method. And then he goes on to say very poetically that the only way we could try to absorb certain elements from the outside world is only if we stay faithful to our tradition. When interpretation is strictly literal, if we interpret the psukim literally, then we're going to have collision. It's going to be really problematic. But only drush smooths out the rough spots. It alone permits opposites to coexist. And only through drush can doctrines and opinions be formulated and laws and customs be established. Okay, so drush then is not a passive partner, but a creative force. And then he is giving an answer here. His question was when anyone, whether it was Chazal or Tanam, Amaram, Rishonim, Achronim, etc., when they are looking at a pasuk and deriving a message, are they just using their drush as a tool? Did they have a message already in their minds, and then they were just looking for some word they could attach it to, or did they find two psukim that contradicted and with some very creative twist of the words somehow connect them? Or, or so then it would just be a method. Drush is merely a method. It's just something that's sort of external to the Torah. But we can look at drush another way. Is drush the actual substance? Is it the actual, is the, going back to the psukim, is that another real true message that was lying in the psukim, and then it was just the brilliance of the Baal Drush who is bringing it out. So what Peli concludes, and again, we can all disagree with him, but what he says, it is not a mere method, but it is a substance, that he believes that drush actually has its own value. It is its own, it is one message. It is that the psukim are actually speaking this message. And okay, so now this is really the paragraph that I wanted to look at very closely, because here I am going to show you how the Rav does all three of these types of drush. And that is what Peli argues, is that when the Rav goes and let's say that piece of drush that we just looked at a few minutes ago, true, it may not be the literal interpretation, but he's not just using the words of the pasuk to hang a random idea on, but it's actually within the context of the story. It fits, and it actually was helpful then, and it is helpful now. So so here are three different ways the Bali Agada, the Bali Drush, do it. So one he calls creative philology. It runs as a continuous thread through all of the literature of Drush. It appears also in the guise of creative etymology. That means looking at the roots of words, looking how the words are the same and different, in which each word, every added and subtracted element in the biblical text serves as a jumping off point for fruitful imaginative creativity. Now, this is not the point of this series. I could give a whole lecture on how the Rav does this, but I do want to mention that, yes, the Rav does this. He will take two words, like, for example, ko and po, within the context of a story, which he does with the Akedah, and he brings out a whole spiritual message because of the difference between those two words. He does this, to give you one other example, with the words machaneh and edah, and he does this in kol dodi dofek. Okay, but the other two versions of drush, the other is exactly what I'll be talking about in the rest of the series. Okay, so the second is, by the way, he's quoting here, Peli is quoting here from Isaac Heinemann, who wrote a famous work called Darchei HaAgada. Okay, the second is creative historiography, in which the preacher not only broadens and adds color, names, and details to the development of the nucleus of biblical historical narrative, but also nourishes it from his own resources of meditation and personal experience. So, in other words, what sometimes a darshan does is he adds all these details to make the story come alive, which is what we saw the Rav does often, but besides that, he actually connects it to his personal experience. And we are going to be looking at that in the next class, in class 5, how the Rav does this, how he actually brings it back to himself, to his own day. However, there is still, and now here's the third type of drush, another line of creative drush in which the preacher transports himself with all his thoughts, beliefs, and traits into the biblical situation or into the portion of the biblical hero out of complete and empathetic identification. So we've already seen a little bit of this. We're going to see and hear more today about how uh, the Rav goes back in time and he actually transports himself back to those days, and that is how he is able to depict the Avos. So in this situation, he seeks to discover himself, but without severing his ties to his own time and place. But the message that he derives is relevant to nowadays. So it's not just a time travel machine. Okay, I'm walking alongside Avram Avinu, etc. But how does what Avram Avinu was going through, his travails, how do they speak to me? Okay, so we are now going to look at some examples of this bit about how the Rav transport himself back in time and how the Baalei Masorah come alive for him. Okay, any questions before I bring those examples? Okay, good.
Yes, I would like to ask you,
Sure,
I would
yes.
like to ask you whether you think there is an analogy between the inauthenticity of the source with crypto history and crypto nourishment effects.
So inauthenticity of the source, you mean that
If the darshan puts himself into the shoes of the source, he becomes a crypto source.
Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by crypto source.
It is unauthorized by authority. That which is crypto is not authorized by authority, as Rabbi Feldman pointed out in an article in Sapir, which you might like to read.
I'm not sure. I think one could perhaps look at it that way. So what the exegesis means drawing, ideas from the text. Eisegesis means sort of reading into the text what you wanted to say firsthand. So some people might argue that perhaps that's what the Rav is doing, or any darshan is doing, that he comes with a message. He knows he wants to speak about XYZ today, so he looks in the parsha for somewhere he could read it in. So perhaps that could also be called crypto. So it's really, you could look at it either way.
I like that contrast between eisegesis and exegesis that you've just made. It's very profound.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for all your insightful comments. They really enhance the share. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller just because I had blown it up before. Okay, so here is an excerpt from Out of the Whirlwind, which I haven't quoted from before, which another Torah Sarav book, Essays on Mourning, Suffering, and the Human Condition. Okay, but there's a little bit where we see the Rav transporting himself back. The story of Joseph and his brothers, the story of the destruction of the temple, the story of Moses' death, all used to move me to tears as a boy. It was not just because I was a child. It was not an infantile reaction on my part. It was very much a human gestalt reaction. These stories do not lie in antiquity. They are part of our time awareness, part of our historical experience. Similarly, there is no archaeology in Judaism. There is history, but not archaeology. Archaeology refers to something dead, a remote past of which I am no part. It arouses my curiosity. I am inquisitive to know about the origins. But history to us, and I didn't copy the next page, but he talks about history being a living reality for us, not something that's dead in the past. And I'm hoping the last few minutes to play another video of the Rav where we actually hear him talk about this.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
If 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 you believe that that both the torsible path, just like the torsible path, is missing Miss Sinai. Doesn't follow logically that the message had to be in the original, and uh you can't impose your own idea.
Right. Okay, that's an excellent question. Whether there, and that is actually a very major school of thought that all everything was given at once to Moshe, the Torah Shebechtav and the Torah Shebal Peh. So that means that all the midrashim and the Agada that Chazal
I don't
did
accept that, by
were
the way, but
okay. Yes, but it's definitely one way to look at it. That even though they seem to be interpreting it in at that time uh, for that generation, perhaps for future generations as well. It was all given at Sinai, and they're just tapping into maybe it was with Ruach HaKodesh. So yes, that is another way to look at it. And then if you believe that, then yes, you could argue that we don't have a right to do drush today. I don't know what to say. Pelly clearly disagrees with that, and okay, definitely food for thought. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm sharing here is a very, very famous story that the Rav wrote in Uvikashta Misham, which was originally written in Hebrew. And let me see if I could quickly pull it off the shelf. Okay. It was relatively recently translated into English, and from there you shall seek, and it's considered in a way a companion volume to Halachic Man. But I'm not really discussing this, what the whole essay is about. But within the essay, when he's talking about the Masorah, he relates a story about how when he was a little boy, how he believed that the Rambam was right next to him. And I'm sharing this as another example of how the Rav transported himself back in time. And just keep in mind, he was quite young, but already he had this sense. And this translation actually is not from the book I just showed you. I happen to like the way Rav Aaron Lichtenstein translated this story, which is collected in this book of essays, Leaves of Faith. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein was the son-in-law of the Rav. So, in the Rav's words, I remember how, as a young boy, isolated and friendless, I was frightened of the world. The world was cold and strange. I thought that everyone was making fun of me. However, I had one friend, don't laugh at me, and that was the Rambam. How did we become friends? Simply, we met. The Rambam was a frequent guest at our house. When my father and teachers still lived with his father-in-law, the pious Gaon of Eliyahu, Feinstein, and Prizhan, father would sit and study day and night. Around him gathered a group of young scholars and exceptional Bachrim who would eagerly attend his lectures. Father's lectures were given in the parlor of grandfather's house where my bed stood. I used to sit on my bed and listen to father's lecturing. He would always speak about the Rambam. This was the procedure. He would open the sugya and say, this is how the Ri and the Tosafis, Abalei Tosafis interpret it. Now let's look at the Rambam. And father would find the Rambam differing from others and departing from the simple meaning. And then he would complain, we understand neither the Rambam's assumption nor his way of explaining the sugya, as though protesting to the Rambam himself. Our master Moshe, why have you done this? And then father would say the Ravid's objections were correct. And then he describes how everyone would jump up and start arguing. And then finally father would refute all of them and say the words of our master are as hard as iron. And he would lean his head and sink deep into thought. After a long time, he would raise his head and say, gentlemen, let us see. And he would begin to explain. Now, from the Rav's point of view, I would strain my ears, although I understood not a word of the matters under discussion. He was about 7 or 8, maybe, at this point. He had his little bed in the kitchen. The Rambam was surrounded. Nevertheless, two impressions coalesced. The Rambam was surrounded by opponents and enemies who wanted to do him a bad turn, and Father was his sole defender. Were it not for Father, who knew what would happen to the Rambam? I would feel that Rambam himself was present here in the parlor, listening to Father. The Rambam was sitting with me on my bed. What did he look like? I do not know exactly, but it seemed that his appearance before Father was most comely and handsome. He had the same name as Father. Both were called Moshe. So he continues describing how his father would think and think, his eyes shut, but then the tension would lift and he would start defending the Rambam, explaining the Rambam. New light shone. The difficulties were overcome. The sugya was interpreted properly. The Rambam emerged victorious. Father's face radiated joy. He had befriended his friend, our master, Moshe, son of Maimon. A happy smile could be seen on his lips. And I too was part of that joy. I was happy. I was elated. I would jump up from my bed and run quickly to my mother's room with the exhilarating news. Mother, mother, the Rambam is right. He defeated the Ravid. Father helped him. How wonderful Father is. But then, sometimes he relates, the Rambam's luck didn't hold. His enemies surrounded him, and Father would try to defend him, and it wouldn't work. And finally, his father would raise his head and very sadly say, Teku, the Rambam's formulation is very difficult. There is no solution. We must leave it for another day. The whole group, and Father among them, was sad. We were, as it were, tearfully taking leave of the Rambam. A quiet melancholy settled on every face. Tears would flow from my eyes. I would even see tears glittering at the corners of the Rambam's eyes. Slowly I would go to Mother and say to her with a broken heart, Mother, Father could not justify the Rambam's formulation. What should we do? Don't be sad, Mother would answer. Father will find an answer for the Rambam. And if he doesn't, maybe you will when you get older. The essential thing is to study Torah with joy and enthusiasm. So we clearly see from here how even when the Rav was a little boy, he was transporting himself back into the past, into the Baalei Masorah came alive to him based on the way his father would learn, and to the point where he actually could picture the Rambam. And we've discussed earlier in the class how the Rav always had this strong connection with the Rambam. But I do want to share something else, which I have to thank you all. Mikol Moladai Hiskalti, when at the beginning of the course, someone asked a question that reminded me, someone asked about the Ramban. Oh, I believe it was you, Rabbi Hepner. So I'm sharing with you an excerpt from Rav Moshe Lichtenstein's Hesped on the Rav, and how he describes how he learned the Ramban with his father. The last summer that I had the privilege of learning with my grandfather, we studied Ramban's commentary on Bamidbar. It was an awesome experience. Under his steady and sure guidance, we set out to tackle all the issues which Ramban presented to us. Wherever the winding paths of Ramban's multifaceted curiosity took us, there we followed. If it was a halachic discussion of an issue, such as Yayin Nesech or Tumat Met, we dealt with it. When a purely interpretive linguistic question came up, there we were, ready to examine it with the proper tools. Whenever Ramban scaled the heights of a philosophical issue, we were able to follow in his footsteps. And when the commentary approached the Torah from the perspective of Derech HaEmet, the true path, the Kabbalistic approach, my grandfather explained it clearly and lucidly. Suddenly, Ramban's cryptic hints were transformed into language and concepts accessible to all. And this is the point that leaped up at me now. I was convinced at the time that Ramban must have known that centuries later there would arise amongst the Torah scholars a man capable of fully appreciating his work. And to this person and his peers over the ages, he directed his monumental enterprise. The entire time that we sat learning together, I could not help but feel a silent, ongoing dialogue of hidden love between Ramban and the Rav, leaping over the distance of time and place that separated them but by accident. Those who enjoyed the privilege of participating in the Archei Kala in the summers or hearing him on many other occasions surely know what I am talking about. All that I can manage to say in conclusion is that my grandfather, the Rav, has left us, and we cannot even study Ramban on our own. So not only is that a great example of how the Ramban, so to speak, came alive for the Rav, or perhaps, as Rav Moshe is saying, that the Rav came alive for Ramban, but also shows the connection between a grandfather learning with his grandson, which is exactly what we saw was the secret of uniting the generations. Okay, so I want to end.
Do you think the Ramban's opinion about that living in Eretz Yisrael was one of the Tariq Mitzvot influenced the Rav to not be an anti-Zionist?
That's a very good question. I'm sure it had a lot to do with it. Just you should know that the Rav never saw a Ramban until he came to America, just by the way. So that is that was, I think I heard of Moshe Lichtenstein share that somewhere. Okay, so I just want to share now the screen with a video. Now it's not really a video. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, 1 second. So really, there is one extant video of the Rav giving a tshuva drasha that is actually well done. So what Dr. Arnold Lustiger does is he'll take excerpt from a Yiddish drasha. This one happens to be from the 1950s, but what he'll do so that we have some visual reinforcement is he takes stills from that video, which is from the 1970s, and he kind of matches up what the Rav is saying with the Rav's facial expressions, etc. So just keep in mind, the Rav is going to sound very young because he was young when this is part of a Yartzeit drasha. But on the screen, he's going to look older because that was taken from the 70s. But it does give you the sense that we are watching the Rav. And I'm sharing this because he really ties together everything that we've been saying about the Masorah and time and bringing the Avos to life.
Bin ich einsam und herum. Die Akkorde. Was tun sie denn? Ich komme zum Schluss. Und die gegeben etwas, was kein Nummer beloschen hat, das kein Olega hat. Nicht nur mir gedenken dem Ovach. Gedenken dem Ovach ist Eichakun. Wir tun es, als der Ovach ist gar kein Ovach nicht. Weil der Hewe ist die Frucht auf dem Bein von Ovach. Ich bin doch gar nicht doch in Hewe und in Novar. Der Hewe mit Novar werden zusammengegossen. Sie sehen der Erfahrung von Sekele Bambeu. Sie gar nicht geschalschere Sakabole. Sie gehen alle zusammen. Bei Jeden sitzen doch alle und spießen in Einzugehen. Von Avromen bis David. Wir sind gelebt in verschiedenen Deren. Und hier sitzt doch mit sie. Die Chassina, man kennt doch nicht treffen in Einzugehen. Alle da beacht. Hier ist gar kein Novar nicht da. Es ist doch Einzugehen. Und hier sitzt in der Suche mit den 7 Muspisen und hier bin da. Und ihr darf nicht gehen, ihr darf auch nicht erzählen, das ist mir einmal angemerkt. Wer es hat gelernt in Cheder. Und wer ist der Ayid von Tere? Ayid für Judea Sefer. Der ist ganz gut. Wer ist Avrom bei uns? Ist Avrom bei uns eine archäologische Figur? Was wie die Pharaos von Ägypten, seine archäologische Figuren zu den Highschool Boys, was lernen die Geschichte von Ägypten? Oder Avrom von uns ist ein lebendiger Vater. Wer ist da gewesen, ich denke noch von Cheder, ich habe noch Cheder Erinnerungen, ich habe gut nicht gekommen. Heinz das nicht gesagt. Ich habe noch Cheder Erinnerungen, ihr gedenkt, als wir lernen Parche Lechlecher, das lernen meistens noch Sukkes. In die kleinen Städtlach in Achaslavitsch, die Gassen werden gepflastert, und sie gewinnen in tief Russland, der Winter wird voll in Früh, und das ein der größere Herbst, der nasser Herbst, wir haben in Indien Sommer nicht gehabt, und es vergissen und regnen, und die ganze Städte wird verwandelt werden in eine große Plotte in der Sumpf, und bei Nacht hat man es halten und noch in der kleine reingefallene Stiefel von der Melamed, der Lubavitcher Chosse da, an eine von alten Reben, und bei ihm vielleicht auch zusammengießen, Avrom, mit dem Tanje, mit dem Heinz Lubavitcher Reben, und mit allen deren zusammen. Und wir pflegen lernen, bei jener Adishem el Avro, Lech Lecho, Meyartecho, Meladetecho, und wir Kinder pflegen verstehen den Isoin, wie geht denn das jetzt der, und wir pflegen gehen mit Avromen, wenn man nicht Avromen geht, wir pflegen wandern mit ihm. Wir haben gewandert mit Avromen, und wenig haben wir gelitten mit Jesus und beim Mechirat Jesus. Ich gehe schon meistens von 2 Jahren zurück, ich kann dich auf Tränen vergossen über Jesus. mir gelitten auf mir gelitten auf die Gmalim mit Johnny mit die Schmelin dann durch alle Zorres mit bitte Ferchen dort mit und wir haben gewandert mit Jesus zurück mit Janke mit Traim und wir dann gestanden bei Janke mit Bettel was gesagt hast so wie Schimel ne Jage und ihr wisst doch der Rebbe vielleicht kommen in Cheder vielleicht haben die spezielle Melodie mit Sachen vielleicht singen und die Broches rufen Preirat okay hebräische Szene sagen wir viel wie wir gesagt Sachen mit Jage und als ich weiter und weiter man gegangen mit Schimschen und wir haben durch die ganze Tragödie mit Schimschen mit Kulen mit David Amelech und mit Choben und Geseder mit Rabbi Kiven und mit Rabbi Hanine ben Tradien und als ich Geseder und wir haben da gefreut mit Ezren und mit Nehemia und mit Judah mit Kabi und ich das gewinnt war uns dann an Nova es ist nicht ein Nova es ist ein Stück von der Hebe es ist gewinnt der Hebe allein es ist gewinnt Hebe und Nova und Ossit zusammengeknäult und zusammengenommen in einer der Erfahrung von Eitzach Yisroel von Meelom Beyadelom Atokeu und wie sagt Kreska was ist denn der Hebe sagt Kreska Ato ruft dem Hebe der Ato der Ritzer die Tachlis Ova Veyaskola Sosi sie go in Hebe nicht a Hebe kehret ein der Hebe ist mehr nicht die Brick es ist der Link was vereinigt an unendlichen Nova mit der unendlichen Ossi was vereinigt der Lekeyovi mit Vayemahu Yeh ad Hashem echad und Shmei echad es ist Netzach und das ist Masere und das ist Gedusche der Keli ve'anveyu der Lekeyovi waren imenu nicht kein zweite Erfahrungen der Keyovi ist Keli ihr bin Jammel gewesen ihr bin nicht mehr ich war sein Später ist ein Netzach Chais mei Broche sheben Migdash Flag nicht sagen Baruch Hashem Melekenu Melech Olam nur Baruch Hashem Mino Elam Ve'ado Elam sie gar nicht die Zeit nicht zerteilt auf 3 Phasen auf 3 Perioden es ist nur in der Erfahrung unser Keli waren wir Melekeyovi waren wir von der Prine von dem Aspekt von der Heve Tachlis Ova der Schola Sosi sehe ich mein Vater in den 18 Jahren. Der ist gewesen eingeschlossen in der Schachschule Kabbalah. Und zusammen mit ihm, zusammen mit allen Chachma-Messere, schließt sich ein die ganze Gruppe Israel. Der Medrash erzählt,
Oh, sorry about that.
Finish mal gesagt, Menschen, Veyosu im Migdosh.
Okay, I think the Rav, in his own words, said it all, kind of pulled together everything we've been working on for the past
I'd like to
sessions.
point
Wow.
out. I'd like.
Yes.
I'd like to point out that the Yiddish word that the Rav uses for remember is gedenken,
Gedenken.
which means rethink. Rethink. It's not just remembering. It's rethinking yourself. That Yiddish word justifies the Rav's interpretation of the present.
Thank you. Thank you. I did not think of that. Thank you very much.
Yocheved, do you understand this Yiddish?
Yes, I understood it, believe it or not.
No, I'm asking Yocheved.
Actually, I am extremely grateful to my grandmother who spoke Yiddish to me, a real European Yiddish, albeit a Galiciana Yiddish. So when I first started listening to the Rav, the Lithuanian accent threw me off. Then I got used to that, but his Yiddish is extremely rich, so I used to listen, I still do, with a Yiddish dictionary. And once in a while, there was a word that I just could not figure out. And I actually asked my mother, who was here with us on the Zoom, and she grew up in Vienna where she learned German. And she told me, Yocheved, that is not a Yiddish word, it's a German word. I think the word was verwandelt. The Rav loves that word. It means to transform. So he also, his Yiddish is also mixed with a lot of German because he spent quite a bit of time in Germany. But it was well worth the effort because it's as beautiful as his speeches are in English. Yiddish, it was his first language, and there's just something so beautiful and powerful and poetic. You can't match the poetry of his Yiddish to his English.
Thank you. The word that you said is meaning in Yiddish got lost.
I wonder
Okay,
what,
so that didn't fit into the context, but transform does.
Yeah, but
With an
it is
L.
very close. Sometimes when you get lost by yourself, that's
Right.
exactly where being transformed, changed.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I didn't know
I
that.
wonder whether he could have used a different word to gedenken. Whether I wonder how many words there are.
Oh, well, there's Dermanin, maybe?
Dermanen, Dermanen.
Right,
Yeah, that's the one
right,
that I
right. So I like the idea of the Gedenk. Okay, so I just want to say for everyone still on the Zoom that I'll see you, Yetz Hashem, next week. And next week, we're going to look at the other line of Drush that the Rav uses, where he discovers himself in the stories of the Avos, where he connects it to his own personal experiences and how it helps him and hopefully will help us as well when we are dealing with our own personal.
Can,
Yocheved, can I
can
say
I,
something? Can
what
I
was
just mention something to you, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I live in Montreal, and a few weeks ago, Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, I guess it's his great grandson, or was in
It's a great nephew,
a
actually.
great nephew. He came in to
Yeah.
speak on someone's yurt site, and I was very, very moved by him. And then the next day, you gave me this whole, and now this week, this entire like background. And so his whole point about the past, present, and future, and living on and carrying on, the Masorah, it just has come alive so much. It's amazing. So I just want to thank you
Wow.
for doing this.
Okay. I'm glad that I was able to pull that all together.
Yeah,
two
it's
Right.
just
things?
it was wonderful to listen to him in person. Yeah, thank you.
Can you tell me what was the name of the book that you were text that you were using in your Dvar Torah? I missed it.
Okay,
The text, the English text that you were
but which
at
piece?
the end of your Dvar Torah.
Do you mean the
Talking
one
about the
The
about
fact,
rabbis,
Ramban?
yeah. No,
About
no,
Ramban?
no,
Okay, that
about,
was from Man Havalacha, Man of Faith,
yeah.
which was edited by Rabbi Genack, and it's a collection of recollections of Talmidim, family members. Some are Hespedim, some are just memories. It's a really nice collection, and I think it's back in print, so you could probably get it. Man of Halacha, Man of Faith.
But the story of being present with all these Gedolim, that was from
Oh, wait, which one? With
the,
Rambam, you're saying, or
with all of them, and
oh,
justifying his father's justification of Rambam.
not
Moshe justifying Moshe.
The story you read?
right. The story of Rambam, that I got from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein's Leaves of Faith, because the way he translated that story from the Hebrew, I felt was perfect.
And who told you that he didn't study Ramban until he came to America?
Oh, I think I remember where I heard it. It was his son, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. He gave a hesped. I think it was maybe on the Shloshim in YU, and you can actually go back and find this on YU Torah online. And he mentioned it then.
That is just an amazing fact, isn't it?
Yeah, like they had very few svarim. The Briskers, they learned, they had their Gemara, they had their Rambam, they had a handful of Achronim, very few.
But not the Ramban.
Not the Ramban. He only saw it when he came to America. But he fell in love. I think that's pretty much what his son said. He fell in love with the Ramban. Yeah.
By the way, I like you, I feel very privileged that my grandparents also spoke Yiddish to me. It's an amazing blessing to have it. And I for one feel very sorry that so much of that language is lost and being forgotten.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I need to go now. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank
Okay,
you
have a
so
wonderful week,
much.
everybody. Okay,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.